When police arrived at the house, the smell of iron was overwhelming. Crimson streaks dripped down the living room walls. But there were no bodies, no signs of struggle, just blood. And the family? Gone. No calls, no witnesses, no trace. Only one message smeared across the dining room wall. We painted it red like they told us to. The call came in just after 6 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday. A neighbor across the street had noticed something strange. The lights inside the Collins residence had been flickering erratically for hours, and the front door was left ajar despite the chilly wind howling through the neighborhood. The Collins family wasn't known for odd behavior. If anything, they were frustratingly average. The kind of people you never really noticed until they weren't there anymore. When the first responding officer stepped into the house, everything seemed strangely normal. A pot of tea still sat on the stove, half steeped and cooling. Plates were set on the dinner table for settings. A children's show played softly on a loop from the living room TV, the glow casting shadows that shifted unnaturally against the walls. But then the officer noticed the smell, metallic, heavy, almost suffocating, and looked up. Blood. Thick, dripping streaks of crimson painted across the white living room walls. Not just splashes or smears but deliberate brush strokes. The kind you see in an art gallery, methodical and intentional. It wasn't just the color that disturbed the officer, it was the composition. The blood had been used like paint. Not to conceal a crime but to convey something. At first he thought maybe it was a prank or some deranged art project. But that theory collapsed the moment he saw the writing. On the dining room wall, just above the place where one would naturally sit at the head of the table, was a message scrawled in long red letters. We painted it red like they told us to. Backup arrived quickly. The entire house was searched, floor to attic, room by room. No sign of the Collins family, not the parents, not the two children. No signs of struggle either. No broken glass, no overturned furniture. Even the beds were neatly made, as if the occupants had simply decided to walk out in the middle of the evening and never return. Only one thing was truly out of place: the walls soaked in human blood. The forensics team moved in the next morning. They tested everything: floorboards, walls, furniture. The blood had been applied with brushes, several of which were found soaking in the kitchen sink. Whoever had done it took their time. They didn't panic. They didn't run. They painted. Even more unsettling was what the blood didn't tell them. It didn't belong to the family. DNA results later confirmed it came from multiple unidentified individuals, at least 3 different sources. Not one matched Mr. or Mrs. Collins or either of their children. That revelation shifted the case from bizarre to terrifying. If it wasn't the family's blood on the walls, whose was it? In the children's bedroom, toys were arranged into a perfect circle on the floor. A small red dollhouse sat open, its miniature furniture upturned as if mimicking something much larger. On the ceiling above the little girl's bed, someone had drawn an eye. Not a cartoonish one, it was detailed, intricate, almost too lifelike. Painted in blood just like everything else. The house had no signs of forced entry. Every window was locked from the inside. There were no footprints leading out, no tire tracks in the snow. Surveillance footage from nearby homes should have shown something, anything. But in a strange twist, the external cameras either froze or glitched during the window of disappearance. Files were corrupted. One system had its hard drive completely wiped, a fact that left digital forensics teams baffled. Reporters arrived within 48 hours. They weren't allowed inside, but rumors started to spill out anyway. They spoke of satanic symbols, of voices heard coming from the empty home late at night. The word ritual was whispered more than once. The police denied all of it. But those who had been inside, the first responders, the forensics team, even the cleanup crew, told a different story behind closed doors. One detective who worked the case quit within weeks. He told a colleague he hadn't slept since entering the house. Said he kept hearing something faint, rhythmic, like brushes dragging across a wall. Weeks turned to months, but no leads emerged. No ransom notes. No bodies. No sign the family had ever left the house at all. Their phones were still inside. Wallets untouched. Car in the garage. It was as though the Collins family had simply dissolved into the crimson paint itself. And still, that message on the wall remained the only clue. We painted it red like they told us to. Who were they? And why did the family obey? Authorities eventually closed the investigation. The house was cleaned, painted over, and sold at auction. But the new owners didn't stay long. They claimed the red began to seep back through the paint. That they heard the soft sound of brushing every night around 2 a.m. Whatever happened in that house, it wasn't just a disappearance. It was a message, a performance, and maybe a warning. And it all began with the walls. painted in blood. In the weeks leading up to the disappearance, things inside the Collins household began to change, slowly at first, then all at once. It started with Mr. Collins, a mild-mannered insurance adjuster who had worked at the same downtown office for nearly a decade without incident. One day, without warning or reason, he walked into his supervisor's office, handed over his work laptop, and quit. No notice. No explanation. Just a mumbled, "I'm being called home now," and he was gone. No one could make sense of it. He had no known financial troubles, no performance issues. By all accounts, his life was stable, routine. But something had shifted in him. A few days later, Mrs. Collins stopped attending her weekly yoga group. She was described as polite, even reserved, the kind of person who smiled through small talk and never made waves. But in those final days, she began to isolate. Neighbors reported seeing her outside late at night, pacing the backyard barefoot, whispering to herself, or staring up at the sky as if waiting for something. The couple's 2 children, Hannah, age 9, and Lucas, 6, started missing school. The excuse from their mother was always illness, but teachers began to notice patterns. Hannah, once cheerful and engaged, had turned quiet, withdrawn. Lucas's drawings shifted from superheroes and rockets to twisted shapes and long, faceless figures. One day, a delivery driver dropped off 6 large boxes, unmarked, heavy, and hastily carried inside by Mr. Collins. The next day, more packages. One box fell open in the driveway, revealing old books, bound in cracked leather and filled with strange diagrams, circles filled with symbols and words in languages no one recognized. A neighbor tried to ask casually about the deliveries, but Mr. Collins only smiled and said, "Preparing the canvas." Then he shut the door. Inside the home, things were transforming. A technician from the cable company would later recall a service call to the Collins home 2 weeks before they vanished. He was let in by Mrs. Collins, who wore a white dress splattered with what he thought was red paint. He assumed they were redecorating. But the technician quickly became uneasy. The living room was filled with lit candles, arranged in tight patterns on the floor, and the walls were covered in taped-up pages from the books. Some were smeared in red, some had words that bled through the paper as if written too hard. He didn't ask questions. Just finished his work and left. But before he did, Lucas handed him a drawing, a stick figure standing in front of a house with walls that dripped red, and above it, written in childish block letters, "They're almost here." Even their online activity took a dark turn. Mr. Collins, once completely offline, began posting on obscure forums dedicated to ancient rituals and esoteric philosophy. He used a pseudonym, but digital traces confirmed it was him. He spoke in riddles, referencing something called the Crimson Rite, and writing in cryptic lines, "The veil is thinning, soon the red will speak, the walls will remember." Other users dismissed him as a troll or a LARPer. But one person replied, simply saying, "Then paint. And wait." Their grocery bills grew stranger too. Receipts later showed bulk purchases of salt, vinegar, red dye, and, chillingly, livestock blood from a local butcher who had quietly offered it to niche customers for artistic purposes. The family bought thick paintbrushes in multiple sizes, along with tarps, gloves, and eye protection. Not unusual on their own, but together, deliberate, even methodical. They weren't acting erratically. They were preparing. Meticulously. Even the dog stopped barking. Before they vanished, Mrs. Collins was seen one final time at a local bookstore. She asked the clerk for any texts on resonant frequencies in sacred architecture. The clerk, puzzled, asked for clarification, to which she replied, "We need the house to listen. It has to hear us or it won't open." She left without buying anything. The last known photo of the family was taken from a gas station camera 2 nights before they disappeared. The entire family stood still, unmoving, just outside the store, staring at the sky. They remained that way for over 3 minutes, not speaking, not blinking. Then they turned in perfect unison and walked back to their car. It was the only time they were captured together on camera after their descent began. Later, when investigators searched the house, they discovered a journal in Mr. Collins' nightstand. The entries started off normal, daily thoughts, frustrations with work, family notes. But then they changed. One page read, "The red speaks in whispers now. The walls hum when I close my eyes." Another, "They said to prepare a gift. A canvas of flesh and memory. Only then will the gate appear." And then, in darker ink, scrawled across 2 full pages, "IT wants a home." Whatever had taken hold of the Collins family. In the days following the discovery, news of the Collins family spread like wildfire. Media outlets seized on the story, labeling it everything from a cult disappearance to a psychological break gone wrong. But no one could explain how an entire family could vanish so completely, without a single footprint left behind. No credit cards were used. No cell phones pinged. Their car remained in the garage and the house was locked from the inside. It was as if they had simply been erased. Investigators explored every possible angle. At first, they believed the family might have staged their disappearance, perhaps even fled together as part of an elaborate scheme. But weeks passed without any sign of them. No sightings. No communications. Not even rumors. A nationwide alert brought in hundreds of tips, but each one led nowhere. The trail was cold before it had even begun. The theory of foul play emerged next. Could someone have killed the family and hidden the bodies? Yet nothing in the house suggested a struggle. No neighbors heard anything unusual. No strange vehicles had been seen in the area. And that only left more disturbing questions. If someone had killed them, then why the blood on the walls? And if the blood wasn't theirs, whose was it? Where were the other victims? Eventually, the investigation took a darker turn. The house became the center of speculation, not just as a crime scene, but as something else entirely. Paranormal investigators were drawn to it. Self-proclaimed experts who came with EMF readers, ghost hunting equipment, and cameras. They said the house held a frequency, something unnatural. Some described hearing faint whispers in the empty rooms. Others claimed to feel a pulsing under the floorboards like a heartbeat. One woman fainted in the basement, later saying she had seen the walls breathe. The police dismissed all of it, of course. They warned the public not to trespass. But the damage was done. The story had taken root in the public imagination. People began referring to it as the Red House, and legends sprouted like weeds. One claimed the family had been chosen, marked for a ritual that required their surrender. Another said the house wasn't just a home but a gateway. That the painting of blood was not an act of insanity, but an offering. Over time, the story began to distort itself as these things often do. New theories emerged, each more twisted than the last. Some insisted the Collins family had joined a hidden cult and gone underground. Others said they had summoned something and been taken by it. A few even believed they had become something else entirely, no longer human but part of the house itself, watching anyone who entered. The most unnerving theory surfaced years later. A researcher of forgotten rituals, combing through obscure folklore, stumbled upon a fragment from an ancient sect that spoke of the Crimson Rite, a ritual of transformation that required the use of borrowed blood and a dwelling cleansed by red. It was said to allow participants to pass through the veil into a place between places, where the body dissolves and only will remains. It was vague, poetic, but eerily similar to the writing found in the Collins home. When he published his findings online, others came forward. A woman from Idaho claimed her cousin had once spoken of a family obsessed with painting in blood. A man in Oregon said he found a journal in a second-hand store, filled with entries about preparing the canvas and bleeding the walls to hear the voice. None of it could be confirmed. But it added fuel to the fire. The house was eventually sold at auction. The new owners, a young couple with no knowledge of the home's history, moved in and tried to start fresh. For a few weeks things were normal. But then the red stains began to reappear, faint at first, seeping through fresh coats of paint like something alive. They thought it was mold. Then came the voices, soft brushing sounds in the night, like someone painting in the dark. The final straw came when their daughter woke up screaming one night. She said a man with no eyes had been standing in her room, whispering something she didn't understand. When they checked the baby monitor, the screen was blank. Not black. Not off. Just blank, like the image had been erased. They moved out within days. To this day, no one has been able to explain what happened to the Collins family. Their disappearance remains officially unsolved. The case files sit buried in a basement storage room at the precinct, collecting dust. Officers who work the case rarely speak of it, and when they do, it's only in hushed voices. Most want to forget it ever happened. But every so often, someone drives past the house. They stop, stare, maybe take a photo. And if they stay long enough, some say they can hear it. The faint sound of bristles on drywall, the rhythm steady, almost ritualistic. Painting. Always painting. And then, of course, there was the phone call. 7 years after the Collins vanished, a 911 dispatcher received a call from an unlisted number. The voice on the other end was small. Frightened. A child. "We're still here," it whispered. "They won't let us stop. We're still painting." Then silence. The call was traced, but nothing was found. Just static. An empty signal from nowhere. And so, the story endures. A family gone, a house tainted, and walls that bleed with memories not yet finished.